the Power of Passive Investing meetup. We have a great speaker tonight. Frank Greco has agreed to share his story and share with us some nuggets of wisdom on how to purchase real estate during the recession, which he has done himself. He's a former Wall Street guy who's seen, ups and downs of Wall Street as well as ups and downs of the real estate. So, Frank, why don't you take it over and share with us your story and some nuggets of wisdom? Thanks a lot.
Okay. Well, Lena, thanks so much for having me. So, welcome everybody. Hopefully this is both a little bit entertaining for you, a little bit educational for you, and gives you a little bit of perspective of what it's like to be in the real estate business. So the presentation that I'm going to give you is, I'm going to, just talk a little bit before I, go through the slides. I'm going to talk a little bit about, what Safe Harbor Investments is very quickly. I'll get into a little bit about my background, and then I will go into some, pearls of wisdom that I've learned while I was on Wall Street. I'll go into a recent case study because the timing is just actually perfect for this. And I'll talk a little bit about what my journey has looked like for the past 11 months and what it looked like before. And then I'll try to go into some strategies on which you can use if you're looking to purchase commercial real estate in this environment. What you need to do, how you need to act, how you need to think, and hopefully that will breed some success for you, and I'm sure it will. So, without ado, so Safe Harbor Real Estate Investments is a company that I formed, and the owner, of course, and managing director. So what we do is basically multifamily real estate investments. We are an active, or should I say, I am an active investor. I own a few apartment complexes. I also do real estate consulting, a little bit of coaching, and I'm also active in a mastermind group. So if any of you are interested in that, by all means, feel free to ask. So just a little bit about my background, like Alina had mentioned. And I plan to go through these kind of fast, just so that we can hopefully get to a little bit of a Q&A and, strike up a conversation on some of the issues that maybe you've been focusing on or dealing with. So hopefully I can add some value to you there. So my background is primarily economics. I was a research analyst while I was still at the university, and also at the university. I was actually a registered investment advisor where I managed about $100 million. I then, resigned from that role due to the blatant conflict of interest of having to go work at the Federal Reserve. I stayed at the Federal Reserve for about 5 years, I think. Really did a lot of great work. Just briefly, the Federal Reserve is broken up into a couple of different groups. You have open market operations, which is what most people think about the Fed, in that the open market committee and the open market operations are the ones who buy and sell repos, bonds, and basically peg the Fed funds rate, which is the overnight rate. And obviously now, more recently, they've gotten into a bunch of other things, commercial paper and what have you. There's also cash operations, which is how banks settle with one another. You deposit a check from someone else's check, that sort of thing, kind of like a clearinghouse. There's gold operations, of course. The New York Fed holds the most gold, or at least it did while I was there. And then there's another group called bank supervision, and that's what the group that I was in. And within that group, most of the group is ladled with commercial bank examiners, and basically they go out and they analyze loans and some of the operations of the bank. I was in a very small subgroup called Specialized Examinations and Trusts, where we oversaw activities of certain banks that had fiduciary, that were acting in a fiduciary capacity. So they were actually the trustee for wealthy individuals, wealthy people, and having their, having their money managed for them. And it's within there that I found kind of where I discovered, where I noticed that certainly most millionaires, most wealthy people are small business owners. Even though Michael Jordan is, let's say, but the typical millionaire is not the Michael Jordans, the Madonnas of the world, so to speak. They're mostly small business owners. And the small business owners hold high concentrations of closely held corporations, typically their own company, and real estate. They do have a financial aspect of their holdings where they will allocate to the bank to invest for them. But typically that's what it looks like when it comes into the bank. There's a chunk of real estate and there's a closely held corporation. And then typically what the bank will do is not to be in those positions as a business owner or a landlord. They will try to sell those things off and move the funds into liquid assets. But what was interesting and what your takeaway should be is that commercial real estate was a cornerstone of their wealth building. And if they had a small business, they owned the building. And if they owned the building, typically they owned the building and the building was big enough so that they rented part of it, other parts of it out. So that, the other tenants in the small strip mall, for an example, or what have you, or industrial park, helped pay for their mortgage, thus, growing their wealth. So same thing, just although I specialize in multifamily, you could replicate that in a couple of different facets of commercial real estate. Again, just I presume most of you know, but if in the event that you don't, commercial real estate covers a bunch of different things. Certainly multifamily real estate investments, industrial parks, self-storage, mobile homes, office buildings, medical facilities, and the like. So, so after my Federal Reserve, stint, which I really, look back and admire, with the work that I did there. I did a short stint at JP Morgan Chase, attended law school, but that was a long, long time ago. I am not a lawyer. But I left Wall Street in 1999, and I've been on my own now without a W-2 umbilical cord for 21 years, and I've been in the business for about 24 years. So it definitely kept my interest. It's definitely exciting. You never know what the day is going to bring to you. You never know how your day is going to wind up, despite your best efforts to plan. And if you are the type of person that enjoys that ride, you'll love this business and being in it. So I can't speak more about it. So just to get back into the Federal Reserve, and I did have a slide here in another presentation. I had a slide just of some books, but you may want to jot this down. You probably heard of it, but there's a great book out there called The Millionaire Next Door. It was written by a guy by the name of, I think it's Thomas Clark. I always mix up his name because it's like the first name and the last name can be both first names. But it's an absolutely fantastic book. I highly recommend that you read it because it really shows the type of person who is, your more or less typical millionaire and has a lot of financial freedom, which presumably is something that we all share in having as a goal. So, but with that, as you see, most wealth is not known. They're pretty subdued, and they are kind of shun publicity, if you will. They certainly don't think or act like you or I at the, they're outliers, meaning that what you think is the common thing to do as a person, what have you. So back in the day, I'll just share this. There was this big push of, dress for success. And I learned that the millionaires don't do any of all that or any of that stuff. They typically buck the common trends. So in short, you kind of need to learn and appreciate that they typically walk against the crowd. So that's something that is with me every day. Where I see crowds going, I typically tend to run in the other direction. So I'll share that with you. Hopefully, it's just when you do things that are counterintuitive and contrary to what you typically hear insofar as building wealth and what have you. It could be a little shocking at first. And again, I don't know all of you. I know some of you on the call, but I don't know all of you, so I don't know what your background is and what have you. But and like I said before, with the closely held corporations, everyone talks about diversification, and people on Wall Street and people who know just kind of chuckle at that. So if you're in the investment advisory business and you're a company guy, you're going to tell your clients diversification, diversification, diversification. But numerically speaking, if you get into modern portfolio theory and what have you, there comes a point where you over diversify and you're really not gaining any additional benefit from diversifying even more. So hence, going back to the wealth that I had seen was concentrated in, very small holdings, typically a business that they had, real estate, or some other, closely held businesses, maybe with some family members or whatever, that was very productive. All of them share a huge passion for their business. They love their business. They could talk about their business all the time. I could talk about real estate all the time. They could talk about what they were doing. Such a very high level of passion that was striking. So I think it's important to pass that along, because that's kind of where, you'll see them and where, if you have a strong passion for something, it pretty much is a given. You will pretty much find success despite whatever failures you have along the way. And as I mentioned, real estate is definitely a cornerstone of the wealth building, as I had mentioned before. So let me fast forward a little bit into this. So this is a 14-unit complex that I own. It consists of 3 buildings. The front building is very clear in your picture that you can see on the left-hand side. The third building is on the right, where the 2-car garage is. And then this building number 2 is actually behind the first building, which is you don't see on this picture. This is located in Monmouth County, New Jersey, and it was purchased during January 2001, which, for those of you who were active back then, it was a recession. We had the dot-com bust, and this was before 9/11. So the economy was on shaky ground. The purchase price was $425. The building owners who owned it were actually 2 partners for K. Hovnanian. I don't think they work for K. Hovnanian anymore. One of the guys has actually become an independent home builder. Maybe he's trying to compete with Hovnanian, but in any event, he's still around and still active in the real estate circuit. At the time, the purchase cap was 12%. And the cash-on-cash return was 23%. And I also might add that the interest rate at the time was 8% on the loan. For those of you who are new into the business, you'd probably find that like shocking, but that's that's what we were dealing with back in the day. So before I go into the next slide, so I own this myself. I will tell you that I had purchased this property with a partner, and he is a a great guy, and what have you. And we held on to it, and we try to struggle with it here and there, and it was cash flowing. And a couple of years after the fact, we pulled some money out of it, and got most of our money back. But the units are functionally obsolete. They're kind of small. It's an old building, timber framing, and we spent about a year, I would say, where we first talked about me buying him out, and although it slowed up for a little bit, where we weren't doing too much talking, we ultimately resumed talks. But the whole negotiation of going back and forth with me purchasing him out was about a year, and that was last January. I'm sorry, last July. So some of the issues, as I mentioned, small obsolete units. When we purchased the property, the super lived on the premise, and he wasn't doing a very good job. He was a handyman, but and handymans are great, but sometimes you need to really, if you're going to be doing plumbing work, you need a plumber. If you're going to do some electrical work, you need an electrician, that sort of thing. There wasn't really any effective tenant screening, lead-based paint in the units, and the cheap approach was the main drive to the repairs. So we did gut renovate while I was still a partner. Some of the units where we completely removed all the lead-based paint, got rid of everything, went to sheetrock, and we made it as nice as possible. Obviously, we fired the super. We started screening tenants. Since I'm a commercial user, I have back in the day I got evaluated, and I was gained access to pull credit reports and stuff like that, which not everybody can get. Now it's a little bit easier with property management software, Cozy, what have you. And I'm not big on Band-Aids. In fact, I hate Band-Aids. If I see a Band-Aid, I just, the hairs on the back of my neck kind of stand up. And that was always a little bit of a go back and forth between my former partner and I. So one of the things that I'm famous for saying with my guys, so that's why I put it at the bottom of the screen. Typically the guys who had worked for me over the years, they would come to me and say, "Oh, hey Frank, we have a problem," and I was always like bark back at them, like, there are no problems, so only solutions. So it's like a little bit of a mental thing for me, and I was trying to, get them to appreciate that, there is no such thing as a problem. There's only solutions. So I would encourage you to think about that and use that going forward when you're approached with someone telling you that they have a problem, or conversely speaking, if you hear yourself saying that you have a problem, you got to be very mindful of things like that. So one of the things I am not great at is taking pictures of before and after. But this is one picture that I happen to have a before and after of. And this is the same apartment, taken from the same viewpoint, basically when you walked into the door. So you can see how small the unit is. And, obviously we shortened the window a little bit and we moved it over. The one window that is on the left, that's on the right side and on the right in the picture, still remained, but we raised it up a little bit because some of the windows were really, really huge. Everything was stripped away. If you I don't know if you could zoom in, but it's balloon framing and timber framing. Obviously, there was a partition wall cutting across, and it had paneling, and it had those old brass light fixtures, and everything was just done in such a haphazard, quirky manner. So then there was old tiles on the floor, so we actually removed all of that stuff, insulated 5/8 sheetrock, new lights, and the tenant who's in there now absolutely loves it. Walked in, and even though it was small, she was in the process of getting separated, so she needed a place to stay, and she's been in there a couple of months now and absolutely loves it. So then obviously you can see, we have new cabinets, new bathroom, and a modern color scheme, and we're continuing this throughout all of the units. So it's it's a big plus. So a little historical thing, like I said, the cap rate when we bought it back in 2001 was 12%. Cash on cash return was basically around 23%. I think there's a different number. I'm just noticing that now. The market value was 425, 2004. The cap rate started to come down a little bit in town. As interest rates started to go down, because we were now post 9/11, so the Fed was taking action. They were cutting interest rates, and cap rates move. They parallel interest rates. Fed fund rates, 10-year. Basically the 10-year bond, which is the average term of a real estate hold. So cap rate fell to 9%. Cash on cash return went to 150%, because obviously now we had received a lot of our cash back, so we only had a little bit left, and obviously the market jumped, and then 2019. Based upon the market at around a 5% cap rate, the market value is around 1.5 million. So since my purchase of my buyout of my partner last year, and that came due in July, or that happened in July, and I just kind of dove into the property, head first. I was there virtually every day, working with the contractors, sorting out things, how things are going, what's going on, what's our plan for this, what's our plan for that, because you're in one apartment, but sometimes you need to do something in the hallway or into another apartment, because it was at one point a single family home, so wires go everywhere and that sort of thing. So there was a big issue with that, but fortunately we were able to get it all straightened out. And I would add that, and maybe I should have mentioned this earlier, at the time that I had bought him out, we were standing at 45% vacancy. We had some bed bugs, which may be on the next slide, so I'm just going to go. Actually, there's a little bit of a time frame. So let me just go back to this slide real quickly. So refinanced and received about 85% of our original principal. Received all of by 2006, we received all of our principal back through cash flow. So now, of course, you're being paid to own it. 2008, when the recession hit again, we did have heavy turnover, job loss, tenants moved back with their parents. Some B-class tenants moved in, looking to reduce their monthly expenses. So it was a very interesting time frame. 2012, the Hurricane Sandy damaged one of the buildings, but of course we had insurance. And then from 2014 to 2018, we had full occupancy, which was nice, and it was good cash flow. But some of the units were kind of dated. In 2018, when we started negotiations of separating and buying him out, we were hit with some bed bugs. We had to evict people as a result of the bed bugs. we had some major capital improvements because we re-sided all 3 buildings. There was lead-based paint on the outside, so we encapsulated it, which is perfectly permissible. And as I said, we had 45% vacancy, but it was actually still paying its monthly bills, which was nice. So, and then 2019 is when the buyout occurred and major repairs began. So fast forward up until now, all the repairs in all of the units except for one are now complete. It is, with the exception of the 1 unit left, it is fully, leased up and rented. It cash flows beautifully. It appraised for right around with what I had anticipated it being, and the transaction. We signed the papers actually last Thursday, but in COVID-19, you sign on Thursday and then all the documents get overnighted back to the bank, and daylight was burning on Friday. So actually today that I'm doing this presentation for you guys is the day that my new loan actually got funded, all business got settled and done. So it's, and that took about 3 months to do. So in this environment. So now I'm just relaxing this week to take a little bit of a breather before I get started on the last unit with the contractors. So so I think there was, the screen kept popping up, and I guess maybe there were some questions, but I can't see them, unfortunately. So forgive me if you are asking questions.
Frank, there are some questions. I was going to wait till the end, but
okay, that's fine. Perfect.
Okay.
So, so basically, the point of my case study is that buying a property in a recession where the owners, and in my particular case, there were 2 owners that both worked for Hovnanian, who were, maybe, so definitely in the real estate business, maybe they were a little bit more akin to developing rather than owning and managing. And I don't think they had the systems in place, although they did do some good things with some systems. Like, for example, they broke up the heating systems, and there's a heating system in each building, but each unit controls their own heat, which is an upsell, because to be able to go into an apartment and control your own heat, it's a blessing. If you've ever lived in an apartment building where they crank up the heat in the wintertime and you have to have the windows open just to breathe. So, so there's that. So moving on to real estate investment rules that work for me, and hopefully you see some value in these. And if not, that's okay. We could have differences of opinion, but number one is all real estate is local. Real estate is not a perfect marketplace. It's it could be gnarly, it could be clumsy, it can be stumbling and dysfunctional with what goes on in the local real estate market. The information is not perfect, comparatively speaking, let's say, to what the price per earnings share is for IBM or Apple or an S&P 500 company. So you really have to know your local market. And last year, in the beginning of the year, I was spending some time down in Florida, and I was pretty much focused on 1 or 2 markets. But even in one, what we call MSA, Metropolitan Statistical area, there were such differences block to block, area to area, and the brokers that were sending me information that I was talking to, and they knew that I was a serious buyer, and they know that I'm the real deal, and they know I told them what I had and stuff like that, and I was thinking about doing a 1031 tax exchange or whatever. The information that you're getting from the brokers uh, the the um, the documents, they're comparing rents to another building that is maybe geographically close, like maybe 10 minutes away, but it has absolutely no bearing on that particular property, because the people who rent in the other building do so for a very specific reason. And so with the all real estate is local and know your market, I think it's incredibly difficult to learn a market, in my opinion, unless if you're spending a good amount of time there in the market, knowing what's going on, talking to people. And I was talking with the community reinvestment developer or liaison who worked for the town. I was speaking with code enforcement officers. I was speaking with realtors. I was speaking with waiters and waitresses in restaurants about, saying, hey, do you own a house? Do you rent? It's like, oh, you rent. Okay, great. So, where do you rent? I was thinking about maybe taking an apartment here. Where would you recommend me going, or what have you? Have you thought of, what about that area over there? And you'll be surprised what they'll tell you, and they'll tell you exactly what they think. And you could learn a lot about an area. And then from that, once you get to know those areas, then you could see what buildings are coming up and then assess what they're telling you. And then, obviously go through your due diligence to kind of get to what may be a good price. Bigger is not always better. Again, this is personal. Right now in the real estate space, especially in the multifamily space, has been a bunch of people who have entered the space over the past 10 years, being perfectly honest. And there's a lot out there that are, basically chasing deals. And there's a lot of competition. And if you're going to compete with all those people, clamoring over one another to buy that apartment building or that apartment complex because it fits your criteria, and that criteria, however, how you think came about that criteria, that's a whole other story. But when you chase a market that is flooded with a bunch of other people, chances are that it becomes a little risky with how you're going to close on that transaction. You got to be able to move very fast, and the yields may be very razor thin. And that's something that I would cautiously advise all of you on, whether you're doing it actively or passively. That's just for your own personal well-being and personal, ability to sleep at nighttime with where you place your money. I always focus on cash return. It's the way I was taught, and I was taught by a very wealthy man who was a multi-millionaire. He was born into it, and he always believed that every investment that you make, you have to calculate how fast are you getting your money back. So, and it worked for him. You can't argue with a guy who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's like, okay, got it. And that's been a cornerstone of my philosophy. Every time I look at a property, that's the first thing I'll go to. And of course, I'll go to it assessing whether or not if the income and the expenses are reasonable for that type of property, or whether the owner is hiding things or doing things themselves and they're not reporting it. When you're looking, again, you analyze, you assess, and you move. Make a decision. Yes, no, no. I just saw this today actually on Facebook. It said no, next opportunity. I forget who shared that, but I thought that was pretty innovative. My favorite word is next. Like, you take a look at something, don't get hung up on it. If it's a potentially good deal, then yes, maybe stay on it a little bit more and I'll leave that at that, but I'll come back to this particular point about whether or not if you think it's borderline in a couple of minutes. And obviously, know your strengths and weaknesses. What are you good at? What are you not good at? And be honest with yourself. The more honesty you have with yourself, with what your strong points are, what your weaknesses are, the better you'll be able to identify building a team and taking on somebody or partnering out with somebody who's really going to complement your skill set, and you'll have a greater chance of success. So what I said just a couple moments ago about a potentially good deal, again, this is absolutely true. You will never, ever, ever, ever find a good deal. Never. Sorry to, bust your bubble if you're thinking that you might find a good deal. Good deals are always, always, always negotiated. So when you find a deal that has potential in this particular market, the biggest thing that you need to do is to be flexible. And remember that everything is negotiable. It all depends upon how you ask and how you approach and what sort of rapport you develop with hopefully the owner or the decision maker, not necessarily the broker. If it's the broker, that's fine. But hopefully it's the owner. And always be, like I said, very flexible. If you can find out about your seller, find the story behind, him or her or them, if it's a family or whatever, or partnership. Figure out what's going on. Do it quietly, but the more information you have about the seller and what's been going on with the property, how the property's been operating, what's the positives on the property, what are the negatives on the property, what have they been struggling with, what's the area been struggling with, you'll be able to make a better decision about how to assess and analyze and establish fair value for yourself. I always throw this in there, money talks, because you know what walks. And going back to the 14-unit complex that I shared a little bit of information with you previously. When that came on the market for sale, or when I found it, and back then, there was no LoopNet. The computer was around, but most of the deals that you would find in the newspaper, and it was the newspapers, like on the Sunday edition, where they had all these classified ads, and you'd see a little thing for commercial real estate, and this property was advertised. And when I contacted the broker and went to go take a look for it or whatever, somebody had already offered and a price, and I don't know what the price was, and it was accepted, and they were in contract. So nevertheless, I went to go take a look at the property, and again, the numbers looked good, so I wanted to learn more about the property. I didn't say, oh, it's under contract, I'm probably not going to get it, let me go on to the next one. All right, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. Again, if the property shows it has good potential. And obviously there was a good cap rate, there was a good cash on cash return. It was just a question of going in and assessing and, are the numbers accurate or not? And with that, so I did a tour of the property. I did not meet the broker. I met the super who walked me through some of the units. He had this tin can, like a tin lunchbox or like a small little toolbox of all these keys. And they were all, color coded, like they were all like hotel keys. It almost looked like a rooming house. It was kind of weird. And I still have that can. And I plan, when I sell one day, I plan to give that can of keys to the next owner as it was given to me. But at the time, he was carrying this around and opening up the doors and all that other stuff. When you have units, you just go to a master key system and that's it. One key, get in all the doors. That's the way to run it. So I went through the place. There was like graffiti on one of the walls in one of the apartments, and it was, kind of beat up, but nevertheless, I felt the potential for it. I called up the broker. I spoke with my former partner because, we had talked about doing something together. We talked about it. We, had a discussion about it. If we want to move forward, and we moved forward. So I called him up and I said, why don't we meet at the diner? And I said, diner up the road from here that we met at. And, again, prior to the day of, the internet, I couldn't Google his name. I didn't know who he was, what he looked like. So he said that he would have a big briefcase, like a lawyer briefcase, in the aisle, and he would sit in the booth. And we both knew the restaurant, so it was pretty straightforward how that would be. And I remember walking in there, and I was doing some things around the house, and I had, I think I had, so this was post Wall Street, and I was growing my hair long at the time. It's down to like my shoulders. And I think, I had a t-shirt on and it was dirty and my jeans were ripped. And I probably just looked like, some scrunch guy, my hair was all straggly. It's actually kind of funny now that I look back upon it. But I remember sitting down and telling him that, I'd say, oh, probably not what you were expecting, right? And he was like, whatever, you see all types in this business. And boy, was that the truth. And we were talking about the property, and he was saying that it was in contract, but he also shared that, the guy was moving a little slow, although they're in contract. So I said, listen, I like the property. I have another apartment complex a couple blocks away, which I did. And I told him that previously. I said, by all means, go look at the tax records, you'll see who it is. And, so I said, I'm very interested in the property. I like the property. I'd like to buy the property. I'm willing to come in as a second, you let me know. And with that, I had written a check for $10,000 made out to his brokerage agency. And, I opened it up, I unfolded it. It was only folded in half. And I put it down on the table with my finger and I slid it across the table to him. I said, look, I'm serious. Here's 10,000. If they're willing to, whatever what happens with the first contract, if they sign my contract with my business partner, I'll give you another 10,000 that day. And obviously that had an impact on the broker, as it should have, because I was serious and we ultimately did buy it. It was about 4 hours later, I got the call that they had their lawyer break the contract with the buyer, and they signed my contract that I had with, actually at the moment it was just me signing with the agreement that it would be assigned not to someone else, but assigned to, an LLC, which is fine back in the day. And so the following day, I go to the guy's office and I give him another $10,000. So brokers make their money on a sale that actually closes. If it doesn't close, they don't make any money. So obviously they feel comfortable going with somebody who can show that they have money and they can show that they close. And we closed, about 45 days later. It was a pretty smooth transaction. And the rest is, you already know. I shared that with you. So in this particular market, in a recession, obviously you don't want to be braggadocious or flashy with money, right? But in this sort of market, I could share with you that you may come across some owners. They may not be corporate owners, but typically like a family type owner or a mom and pop type owner, that maybe they're tired. Maybe this was enough to, stress them out and they want out. And you need to be able to, communicate on their level, and they need to feel comfortable with you. And now that I've been in the business for as long as I have, it's hard not to get emotionally attached to, your babies. I'm certainly attached to my babies, even though I have, the analytical mind, and I have the, um, I could be very, calculating and very precise with the numbers and analyzing. But you're also dealing with people's lives. Uh, I have tenants. I have long-term tenants. I've had tenants move out and then they move back in. So there's a human element to this business, and part of my why is how I grew up in apartment buildings in a very poor area of Jersey City, which is where I grew up. So when I eventually sell and 1031 mine into something else, I'm going to select a buyer who I feel the most comfortable with, that they'll be able to not only close, but know what they're doing, and know how to care for what I'm giving them and what I'm turning over to them. And I've spent 24 years on my first property that I still own, taking care of it and improving it and making it the best possible, having the most highest and best use of the property as possible. So, and most sellers, if they've owned if they owned it for a while, that's probably how they're going to feel. If they're a syndication that owns it, it may not be as much, because there's two steps. You have the limited partner, you have the GP, and then you have the asset manager, and then you have the property manager. So there's a couple steps that you removed, and it makes it a little bit easier to invest in real estate in that regard. Never chase yield. As tempting as it may be at times, don't do it. You can get burned. And question everything you're being told, question everything that you're being given, and ask as many questions as you could possibly think. There are never, I'm sure you've all heard this before, but there are no dumb questions. Every question is reasonable. So ask as many questions as you can before you get into a property. So this is one of my favorite movies. It's out of the Hunt for Red October. I can't see you, so I can't see if you're waving your hands or whatever, if you've seen it or whatever. But this line is kind of, a little dicey and probably a little, lowbrowed, but it rings so true to real estate. Not that, so this guy is talking to Jack Ryan, great movie, great actors. And the line is, "I'm a politician," which means I'm a cheat and a liar. And what I didn't put in there is that, he also says, when I'm not kissing babies, I'm stealing their lollipops, which is just like, an hysterical line. But that last line at the bottom of your screen, but it also means that I keep my options open. That is the biggest takeaway that I could share with you tonight. As you go forward into the real estate business, no matter where you are, whether you're just starting out, or always, always, always keep your options open, no matter who you're talking to. Always be flexible, always, because it goes back to my earlier point that you never know where the next deal may come from. And the deal may not be a great deal at first, sniff. But if you keep your options open, and if you're fair and communicative with the owner, if you can get to the owner or the broker, and you can, through conversation and through asking questions and through assessing what the property is and doing this, eventually he'll get to, it will be hard pressed to not see that you're a very conscientious real estate investor, and that you're very sure of what you're doing. And that is going to be a big plus, because again, as I said, brokers, if you're dealing with one, make their money when the deal actually closes, not before. So you have to show that you can actually close, and you have to show that you're serious, and you have to show that you actually know the business. And the greater to the extent that you could do that, the greater the success you'll have. So that's pretty much all what I have. I will try to exit out of the screen. This is where I'm at. The website, it's actually down at the moment, but you know, if you're on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook, try to be fairly active there, with adding value, by tapping in to people and answering questions. So I am trying to.
Frank, that's fine. Yeah, you can keep your screen. Great presentation. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. If you're ready, I'm going to start reading some questions
Sure.
back to you. So the first one is actually if you'll be able to share your presentation.
Yes, I can share. Yes, I could send PDFs out. Yes, without
Yep.
a problem.
Yeah, you can send it to me and I'll share with the group.
Okay.
Next question, how do you find your deals? I think you kind of alluded to that, you know, you said there was no LoopNet at that time. It was all about relationship.
Sorry, I'm just looking to get back to the Zoom screen. How do I do that?
You are on the Zoom screen. You're sharing your last page of the presentation. That's
gotcha.
a place to contact you. So I think you're in the right place.
So how do you find your deals? First and foremost, you have to be comfortable with where you're operating. And I think earlier on when we were just talking, Alina, you and I started to go and share a story, but I thought I would save it toward the end. And I'll do that in a second. You need to find your deals in areas that you feel very comfortable operating in. So that could be local to where you are, or it could be far away where you think you may want to go, where you may want to wind up. I'm looking personally down in Florida because I'm looking to move down there. And I like to keep a close eye on my buildings because if there's a problem, you could really nip it in the bud very quickly. So I'm comfortable investing here locally, like in Monmouth County, and also down in Florida, which is where I'm looking to spend time. When you operate in an area and you start talking to people, share your story. What do you do? You know, how do you do it? What have you? So in some of the towns that I operate in, pretty much everybody knows what I do. A lot of people have my number. They call me up. I get calls all the time. People looking for apartment buildings. My reputation. I'm sorry, people looking for apartments because my reputation precedes me in a good way in that they know that I really spruce the apartments up when I got renovated apartment and so forth. So good rapport in that. I try to stay active in town, and I try to talk as many local, realtors or other building owners as possible in the area. So, and sometimes it works just simply through, hey, I'm looking, getting ready to retire or whatever, and conversation comes up, and or you're driving around. Sometimes I look in LoopNet. I see what comes up for sale. Typically, what comes up on for sale locally to me is super, super expensive. But that's pretty much how I find the deals locally. Down in Florida, of course, I'm relying on brokers. I haven't got to the point where I'm reaching out directly to owners. I have found a couple of owners last year when I was down there, and I was, going to give them a call, but then things started to escalate with the buyout in a good way. Then we started going back and forth, and there was a lot of dialogue going back and forth. And then all that stuff got put on a back burner because of the project that I was just on for the past 11 months. And when you're dealing with brokers, that's fine, so you can get some deal flow. but the best is obviously dealing directly with the owners, if you can, and and really getting to know the local market and know what's going on. For an example,
Makes sense. Thank you,
down in
Frank.
Florida, there was a couple buildings that I was looking at, but there was also a group of activists that were going up along the Atlantic coastline, suing building owners for not offering units that are handicapped accessible, and winning. And if you didn't know that, you know, you could really be caught with, you know, on your blind side and buy a building, and now all of a sudden you're being faced with a lawsuit from a group that feels adamant about handicapped accessibility, which is fine. But, you know, your building may have been built in the 80s and, you know, whatever, and it's difficult to do that. But that's a very localized thing. And you need to put yourself in a position where you're establishing a rapport with people who are players in the market that you're in. And obviously the way you do that is, well, it's two ways. One, you know, you have conversations with them. Two, you know, share who you are, and the more experienced you are and the more you're able to convey that you're a serious, you know, apartment building operator, then you're going to be taken more serious, and you're going to start having those lunches, having those coffees, and talking shop and finding out that information. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that was excellent answer. Okay, we have about 15 or so minutes, so let's try to see how many more we can get through.
Okay.
You kind of answered this, but how do you finance your deals? Do you have anything else to add?
So in financing, I pretty much go through bank financing. I kind of like smaller apartment communities. I think they're more personable than larger ones. Again, just my take on it. And I have you know, a fairly good relationship with some people over the years that I developed, which, you know, in fact, the loan officer that I just closed my loan with, my refinance with, I've known him for 17 years. And, you know, I'm a former banker, so that helps. We talk the same language, and I'm you know, a real breeze to deal with. So it's primarily through bank financing, which is going to be 25% down at the least, maybe more, depending upon the bank that you're talking with. And if you don't have the 25-30% down, then, you know, obviously you're looking to partner up with people. So, but primarily I use banks, and I've had good experiences with them.
Thank you, Frank. What is your process calculations to buy out your partner?
That is like probably like a 5-hour presentation. There's a lot in there in a question like that. But some of the key things that I had already talked about is being communicative, keeping your options open, talking through difficult conversations, and seeing, you know, where there's common ground, and then using that common ground as a base from which, you know, you can grow to have a win-win situation. And my former business partner, I think he's a great guy. I have the utmost respect for him, and we parted ways, but you know, I like him. In fact, today I you know, once I got a copy of his check that was being sent to him, because he was owed a little bit of money left, and the tracking, you know, I sent it to, you know, I took you know, PDF, and I sent it to him through text message saying, hey, you know, the remaining dollars is on your way. So, but keep your options open, be, you know, communicative, like I said, and one of the skill sets that I've learned working at the Federal Reserve, since it's a very political place, even back then, and when you talk to bank executives, which I was doing from time to time, they hang on every word that you say because you are from the Federal Reserve. They try to search for, meanings that are within the meanings of of the words that you're saying. So to the extent that you can develop your diplomacy skills, will benefit you well in the real estate business.
Excellent. And never burn the bridges. I think that's
Well, well, I wouldn't say that because I'm a big advocate of burning bridges. So when I left JP Morgan Chase, I called up one Monday morning and I said, I can't come in this week without any prior announcement. And then the following week I called up and I said, I can't come in anymore.
Oh, wow.
And then they started calling and, because I had the laptop and I had the confidential documents and I had the whatever. And, they called whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I got back to them, whatever. But like, it was no big priority because I felt, wow, like this is it. And about a month later, I drove up to New York City and I, parked the car and I went into my office and had my exit interview and cleaned out my office and left. So they probably won't want me back, but, I don't care, really, because I'm beyond that. So you burn the bridge, and you close the door, new doors open up for you, and you either burn the bridge and you're not going back, or you burn the ships and you jump in the water and you got to make it to shore. So, and I was married and I had two young kids at the time. So I had a 2-year-old as well. So, but there's another saying that I learned years prior. Good fortune comes to those who act bold. I don't know who said that. I know the person who told me it, but I don't know who said it initially. But it was just something that always kept in the back of my head. So if you are really passionate about something and you really feel like this is the right move and you trust your instincts and you're a go-getter and you got to make it happen no matter what, and literally no matter what. And so, now that I'm kind of, quasi-retired, I guess, although still looking to buy or whatever, it definitely rings true. You have to, go for it and be willing to pay the price. And, I could say that I paid the price. I put in a lot of hours, a lot of blood, sweat, and equity, literally and figuratively speaking. So, but I loved it. Loved every second of it.
Frank, how much have you spent on capital expenditures in total, and are you counting them in your cap rate and your cash on cash?
So my cash on cash return is basically infinity at this point because I've earned all what I initially put into the property. So I'm not even dealing with my own money anymore, numerically speaking. I've earned it all back either through cash flow, capital appreciation, depreciation, whatever, and cash out refinance. The capital improvements that I did this past year was about, well over 6 figures. And I self-funded that. I didn't take out a loan for that. I just, but I was all in. And my bank account was going low, and it was scary low. So low that it hasn't been as low as it had been in probably a few years. It was really, deplorable. It was very scary, but I believed in what I was doing. I knew the property. I know what I'm doing. I know, I'm a player. I know the rules of the game. I know how it works. And I was able to, get it done and get it over with. And, Thursday after I signed the papers, I could tell you it was a huge sigh of relief. And even though I could be quite stoic, and not emotional at times. As a very analytical person that I am. Thursday night was a little bit of an emotional night. I was on the phone with some friends and who have been with me through this journey, and it was, it was emotional. It was scary at times. I could have lost it all, which is, one of my posts that I put on Facebook, sharing a little bit about what the past 11 months were. So I don't really calculate it in that regard, except to say that for the money that I invested, both in the capital expenditures and what I paid my former partner out on, that dollar amount for dollars invested, I had a triple-digit rate of return over the past 11 months.
Quick question: how many doors do you own?
My doors are low. I'm below 100 doors, so and they cash flow incredibly beautifully. So, I would say for those of you who think of in terms of doors, don't, because doors don't mean anything.
Frank, and if I may, I want to add something. When you say doors are low, it's below 100, everything is relative. I mean, right. 0 is low, 0 is nothing, but if you
right.
have 1 or more, that's definitely
right.
something.
So. I'm just over 25 doors.
Okay, next one.
On several different apartment complexes that are small, between the 5 and 20 unit range, and they cash flow very, very well.
That's the most important thing, that they cash flow very well.
Yep.
Can you please elaborate on don't chase yields? What do you mean by that?
So if you were to look in some markets, you will find 10% cap rate properties. And that may be a very attractive yield to you. And if a yield is that far off, off of the bell curve, off of the norm, an outlier, chances are, while there is the potential, it could be a good deal. If it's being advertised or being, by a broker or whatever, if they're telling you that's the yield from day one, chances are it's it's going to be a D-class property. And one of my friends who's been investing for nearly as long as I have, probably a little bit longer actually, and he operates here in New Jersey, and he's a local guy to me in Monmouth County. He years ago wanted to, and he's done a bunch of different things in real estate. Like I stay in multifamily. Like he's done notes, and he's done sheriff sales, and he's done auctions and all that jazz. Liens, water bills, that sort of thing. He thought that he could outsmart everybody, and because he had so much experience, and chased yields, buying a double-digit cap rate property, like 15% cap rate, and it was in a poor urban area, D-class property, and he felt that even if he was, to miss a couple things, whatever, he'll still make money. Bottom line, he bought, he lost, and he sold about 2 years later, and it took him about a year and a half to find his way out of it. So again, it's all relative. So right now we're operating in an environment where A-class properties or B-class properties are probably going in for like around the 4 to 5% range. C-class properties are closing in New Jersey, or were pre-COVID-19, at 5% caps. So if you find something that's 6%, 7%, okay, whatever. Find something 10%, Just be careful. That's what I mean by chasing yield. If it's too good to be true, or to put it another way, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Next question, I think you kind of answered with all of these.
Yep.
Any scenario of chasing yield that may backfire?
Chasing yield may backfire?
That may backfire, yep.
I'm sorry, could you?
Any scenario of chasing yield that may backfire?
Oh, sure. Well, for example, if you buy in a economically depressed area, tertiary market, for example, you could be sold one good bundle of goods in the property, but then it's not paying, or the people aren't paying, or there's hidden issues, depending upon how well you did your due diligence, and these things can trip you up, and you could will backfire on you if you do chase a yield. So I don't know if that answers your question, or if you want to rephrase it another way, maybe I can answer it better if whoever asked the question.
Yeah, no, I think it does answer the question. Next one, do you use property manager, or do you look after your property?
No, I look after my properties myself. And it's pretty straightforward. I'm really good at screening, and we do ACH for everybody. There's only like 1 or 2 physical checks that we get, and if there's a call in, there's a call. I get a text message what the call is, and then depending upon what it is, in the state of New Jersey, as in most states, you have 24 hours to respond. So normally it doesn't take me that long, but I'll text the plumber, the electrician, or the handyman who's capable of going over and evaluating what it is. So I'm not actually doing anything.
Are you doing anything differently during this time, during COVID, in terms of analyzing deals?
Analyzing properties, I would try my best to get into what the tenant makeup is of the property, who they work for, what type of jobs do they have. I think it's important to know, because when the stimulus or the unemployment stops, these people are not going to be able to pay their rent because they're not working. And they're not working in an industry that doesn't, function as well anymore, or it's changed dramatically. For example, travel industry. There are not going to be as many planes in the air as there were 4 months ago, next month, or in 2 months. It's just not going to happen. There aren't going to be as many restaurants. A lot of restaurants aren't going to be able to survive. So depending upon what type of job it is and where it is, right now it's actually kind of cool from an economist standpoint. So we've had this major disruption, and now the economy is trying to find equilibrium again. It was humming along nicely, and then this came along. It's like kind of blew it out of the water. But there's going to be a new equilibrium, and we're not going to find it for a while. It's just maybe by the end of the year, probably early next year or second quarter of next year. By the time everything all settles out, I think you're going to see a migration of people moving out of the urban areas. The re-urbanization that we've seen, I think, is now going to occur in the reverse. And what that looks like and how that ultimately shakes out with all the buildings that went up, I don't know. But time will tell. But if you're in an environment where people want to move southeast, for example, you'll probably get a fare better. But that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing differently. I'm trying to find out who the employer base is of the tenants who live there.
Any issues with collecting rent?
No, 100%. all the way, all through this.
Excellent. And the last question, and we're actually at the top of our, I'm not sure I understand it, but how you know when to move on after analyzing and assessing?
That comes with experience. It's subjective. There's lots of, being able to read between the lines, your communication with, to and from the broker, to and from the seller. I was negotiating a 18-unit property in New Jersey for about 2 months with an owner. And, great conversation. He was even looking to hold paper, which is like, unheard of in New Jersey. Common in other areas, not so much in New Jersey. And a lot of good information, take in the information, you take notes, you assess, and, you go back and then you ask some more and you kind of let it absorb in. And with experience, you just have to know, it comes back to knowing yourself. And on this particular property, the owner was doing a lot of the stuff himself, and I'm not into doing a lot of the stuff myself. Too tired. Or lazy, or whatever you want to say. Actually, not lazy. You'd have to really search long and hard to find somebody who's going to call me lazy. But he was doing a lot of the stuff himself, and I know how I operate. I know how I like to operate a property. I know what works for me in the years of experience that I've been doing it. And it was not the type of property that I was looking to get into and take on such an active role. That's not why I invest in real estate. Looking for the passive income. And although I self-manage, I don't really consider that. So technically it's active management, and I'm involved, but it's not that active. I mean, really, when you, out of the units that I have, out of everything that goes on, out of the calls that I get, and out of the way I've structured the apartments, redone them so everything is modernized in them. So if there's repairs, they're very basic repairs. Maybe it's actual property management is probably about 4 hours a month, 5 hours a month. That's it. So, not really bad at all.
But it took some time, right? And some sweat equity to get to that point.
So years ago, when I was renovating the apartments and stuff like that, it was definitely a trying time. But like, for example, on another complex that I have, I hardly ever get, there's hardly ever a repair. In fact, I had, last month or 2 months ago, I had a repair, and it was the first time I had a repair on that property in 6 years, maybe. And it was the motherboard of the furnace blew and had to be replaced. And again, it was a 2-minute phone call, call up my vendor, tell them the address, tell them the tenant's telephone number. They connect to make sure that they're there so that they could open up the door and let them in. He texts me what the issue is. I say yay or nay, thumbs up, thumbs down. Obviously, it's going to be a thumbs up because I want it fixed, because I don't want them to have any heat. Done. Get sent an invoice, gets paid.
Excellent. Frank, this was really good. Thank you very much for your presentation. Guys, I know there are a couple more questions, but we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to wrap it up. Take Frank's information, contact information from the screen.
Yeah, definitely.
Directly.
Yeah, emails probably work the best, but by all means, if you're active on Facebook, there's a pretty active real estate group on Facebook. or like real estate investors, we all kind of connect that way. So, or LinkedIn, which I'm not on too much. And hopefully, like I said, the website will be up and running fairly soon, but email works best. If not, you could always message me off of Facebook, and be happy to have set up a consult with you, and we can go over anything in more detail that's pertinent to you.
Sounds
So
good. Thank
Alina,
you very much.
once again, thanks for having me. Thank you all for being here. Hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you got some nuggets out of this and sharing a little bit about my story. And if I can be of any help, by all means, feel free to connect.
Yeah, no, this was an awesome story, Frank. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yep.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Good.
Bye all. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.